just say, hey, can you?
That might take a little bit.
Just
there's enough people that have the expertise. I think we just it's so easy to take a picture.
Yeah.
Now and immediately download it to them, and you can send it and share it in seconds. And your phone takes a great picture.
Yep.
So that could be done in real time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You push your brain to
I mean, all right. I like it. No, I haven't. I don't have plans to. We
I talked to Sam Paul. I talked to Sam.
Ricky's in.
The problem with it now, not Ricky's an exception, but you go to the match and say, I have to play with that and new players come in.
Well, I was gonna say he's in town, and he went last Sunday to watch him. I think they beat SMU.
Okay.
But we had our lunch, and so I was hoping Lauren and Ricky would come join us for lunch. And actually, Lauren did, but So yeah, I don't know. Gary and I. So next week is spring break for the high schools. So are we going to ski? No, but we're going. She just left this morning for Peru. Yeah, she's going with some of her with a class basically. So Carrie and I decided we had no one, so we decided we're going down to Cancun for a few days.
That's a great idea.
We're not leaving the resort. That's what we do. We just go sit. We just go sit by the pool.
I would do a timeshare.
No, we're staying at a nice hotel.
You would never buy it.
You get locked in.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, good idea.
Hi, I'm good.
Nice to see David.
Well, until we start reading. Baseball. Six. Next up, good. We're going to bring this order up to the
Oh yeah, I'm right there.
We thank you for
Why don't we have
Linda, I hope you can join us. Klaus, this is going to be our newest member today. This is Christmas Price.
Nice to meet you.
Good, how are you? His that all right? We try.
It looks a lot better than in reality. Nice to meet you. Sure.
Would you like some lunch?
I thought you said wine. I thought not immediately. If I need to talk, I should tell them. Well, I do them usually from home, but Zoom, so people can one on one. I have a few in-person sales. Social interaction is much better. There's two reasons. A, it's a money pandemic helped me with the transition. But the work burden is also
Looking for you everywhere.
But I have a conference coming up, a 2-day event. Russian will go in the Wilson Library, the 5th and 6th of November. That is open to the public, so I'll mention that. We have already said hello.
Well, hey, you here.
There's no reason.
Bourbon Bill Clark.
It's nice up there.
Oh, shit, I'm doing that.
Don't get up. You're okay, Kevin.
Next week, whenever works for you. Place, would you rather Let me pull this out. Thank you.
First year or so, you don't come to
I'm gonna go make a plate, sit down, and try to eat it. What's up? How's it doing? What's going
I can make it up. I'm the problem. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, right?
Yes, I am. And you would see Klaus and Margaret family medicine, and I do time with our community health initiatives. I'm not a provider, but in programs and initiatives to members of the community, even if they're not patients, and particularly around
Baseball is back. Very American pastime. Despite the Dodgers and Cubs having played a couple games a week ago in Japan to sort of start the season, the real opening day was yesterday. Where all 30 Major League teams played, 15 different sites. 14 of which were on American soil. There was a game played in Toronto, but that sort of counts because before long it will be the great 51st state. Or if not, I understand there are plans later this summer for the Blue Jays to relocate to Greenland. So we're covered either way. I was a last-minute call-up from the minor leagues to fill in as Sergeant at Arms today. Mike Roach was called out of town suddenly because his brother went into hospice care sooner than expected. So let's bow our heads for a moment of silence during which we send good thoughts to Mike and anyone else who maybe could use a pick-me-up. Thank you. Do we have any guests today? No? That's okay.
Well, call on Cliff's, yes, there.
We have a guest without a host?
Yeah. Tom, is Tom still here?
Jim, you have a guest.
My guest today is Phil Phillips, good neighbor, good friend.
Welcome.
Felix.
I'm going to start the fine basket. If you are a baseball fan, put in $1. If not, put in more. All right, I have a question. What do you do with a rhino with 3 balls?
I got you. Walk to the elephant.
Exactly. You walk and pitch to the elephant. All right.
Baseball show.
Baseball. Baseball's a theme today. I love baseball. I love the great and routine plays, the strategy, the fact that unlike other sports, every playing surface is different. They're not uniform like in all the other sports. I love the stadiums, both the old ones and the new. I love the statistics, the numbers involved. And having mentioned statistics, there are baseball records which will likely last forever, and I'm going to share some of those with you. First, maybe foremost, well, I don't know about foremost, but Cal Ripken's 2,632 consecutive games played. He smashed to smithereens Lou Gehrig's record, which stood from 1939. And Ripken's record now is to 27 years, and it's 2,000 games more than any current player. So I don't think it's about to be broken anytime soon. Cy Young, pitcher, 511 wins. For pitchers post-1920, Warren Spahn, great lefty of my Milwaukee Braves, is the leader with 363 wins. But of active pitchers, Justin Verlander is the leader with 262. Oh, can't see me. And you want to? Okay.
Put it back.
So Verlander has 262 wins. He's just barely past halfway to Cy Young's record, and Verlander is 42 years old, so I don't think he's going to make it. Nolan Ryan, 5,714 strikeouts. Verlander also is second in this category with 3,416. Again, 2,300 behind at age 42. Now that record stands. Joe DiMaggio, 56-game hitting streak set in 1941, so 84 years ago. I didn't check the box score to see if he played yesterday, but the current leader with the longest streak is Jose Iglesias with 14 games. So, Joe, rest in peace. Sam Crawford, 309 career triples. Triples are like a dying art. Now, Crawford played from 1899 to 1917. The active player with most triples is Starling Marte of the Mets. He has 55 in a career that's lasted 13 years. So, average just over 4 a year. Crawford had 26 in a single season. Hack Wilson, 191 RBIs in 1930. Highest total since the turn of the 21st century is Sam Sosa in 2001 with 160. Barry Bonds, and this one is incredible, 688 career intentional walks. Albert Pujols was second with 316. In the first 25 years of its existence, from 1998 to 2024, the Tampa Bay Rays franchise, every player total only received 685 intentional walks. So 3 less than Bonds had himself. Speaking of Bonds, he doesn't get much respect anymore because of his steroid use, but despite that fact, he competed, against pitchers who were also doing the same thing. And some of his accomplishments just can't be ignored. During the 2004 season, the year Bonds turned 40, by the way, he was walked intentionally an incredible 120 times. The entire American League only registered 106 intentional passes. That entire season, he only swung and missed 92 times. In 2001, Bonds played in 153 of the 162 games on the schedule, had 476 official at-bats, and set the single-season home run record of 73. In 2004, the year I was talking about, he saw action in 147 games, was limited to 45 homers, largely because they never walked him. They walked him intentionally, a total of 232 times that year. So he only had 373 official at-bats. His batting average in 2004 was .362. His on-base percentage, .609. Let that sink in. He reached base over 60% of the time. And his slugging percentage was .812. Meaning his OPS, his on-base plus slugging, was 1.421. Now consider this. If a player went 2 for 5 with a single and a home run in every game of the year, all 162 games, he would have batted 400 and had 162 homers. And his OPS, on-base plus slugging, would have been 421 points lower than Bonds. And so I want to tell you a story. Probably most of you have heard this before, but it bears repeating. 2 old guys, up there in age, they were probably the same as the average age of East Chapel Hill Rotary. And they were best buddies, and every year they would go to opening day baseball games together. And they tried to make it to some others, but they'd always make opening day. And finally, like I say, they're up there and they're worried about how much longer they're going to be able to do this. So one of them said, we ought to make a pact. Whoever dies first, we'll come back and let the other know if there's baseball in heaven. So we decided, that's a good idea. So, sure enough, one of them passed away during the off season. And the next day was opening day, and lo and behold, the one who's still living, the ghost of the fellow who passed away, shows up and says, I have good news and I have bad news. And the good news is there's baseball in heaven. The bad news is they're slated to pitch tomorrow. And before I said, let me tell you that not too long ago, St. Peter and Satan got together and decided, we really ought to form an afterlife baseball league. So they worked out the details, all the rules, and they're about to shake on it. And St. Peter said, are you sure you want to do this now? Because I'm going to have Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, although he might be frozen, I'm not sure. Luke Gehrig, Cy Young, Walter Johnson. I've got such a star-studded roster. There's no way that we're going to win a game. Satan said, I'm not too worried about it. I've got all the umpires. President Tim?
Thank you, Steve. As a pitch hitter for Mike. I think you're batting 1,000, so I appreciate that. I will remind folks to please turn off your cell phones. Mr. Bedore, you have a quick special presentation.
Brian Gilliam and Vivian Clark, please come up. We're good. Come on, Vivian. Can y'all hear me from here? Yes. Okay, good. Come here, buddy. Where's your bride? Here she comes.
Bride, my first wife.
She's a saint. You took her breath away. 22 years ago, Brian came to us as a valuable member of this club, engaged in many different ways. And one of the things that I remember is your special programs of entertaining and interesting that I enjoyed. And then 3 years later, we finally got the upgrade we were hoping for. Vivian became a member, and she's been just as valuable. And so as a couple, they have given to us, to our foundation, your foundation, the $5,000 that goes to the designation as Phil Rominger Fellows. And so you both are Phil Rominger Fellows, and you're well on your way to the legacy status. Your foundation right now stands at $1,350,000. Thank you for recognizing me. Somebody got, yeah, we got to put it in there. You come on, Linda. Yeah.
Brian, you got to take that sweatshirt off.
Photoshop.
And I have to acknowledge that Duke is alive. It's okay. You don't have to cover it up.
We acknowledge that.
Hey, thank you.
We just talked about health. Fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian and Vivian. I hated to miss it, but this past Saturday we had our tech cycling event. Our numbers were up from even last year, which was a very successful. I think we served 135 different parties, up from 122 last year. Karen, do you want to say anything about y'all's success?
Yeah, it was a great event. People were very appreciative. Yeah. It was a great event. People were very appreciative of it. So it was right, 135 households. This year we almost filled the truck. Last year we got 2/3 full. It was pretty full. It was pretty impressive. We had all kinds of things. Lots of vacuum cleaners this year. Lots of monitors, computers, printers were big. We had satellite dishes, ice, what was it? Wine, it was supposed to be an ice maker, at-home ice maker. So, beautiful day, combined the best of service and fellowship, and a lot of people in this room were there working on it and did work before. Would all of you contribute to this? Please stand up. Come on, some of you can do it.
We should have a special thank you for Karen.
Yeah.
And for Tom, who unfortunately is not here and has done an incredible amount of work since the beginning. And then I had to do even more when I disappeared for 4 weeks, not too far in advance of the event.
Well, Karen, thank you. It's a great event, and I hope we continue to do that. I have more readers. If anyone has other readers here in the past, please come claim those. The baseball game that we're going to is Tuesday, April 15th. My email keeps saying Wednesday, April 15th. It is a Tuesday. So if your Tuesday's free that week, please come out. We won't have a meeting on Friday, April 18th. So if you want Rotary that week, that's your chance. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, against the Charlotte. Some of us, unfortunately not I, because something's come up that will prevent me from going, maybe the second half, but several folks are going to the Casual Pint around the corner here for the women's college game. I spoke to the building owner over there, and if it was a nice day, he was going to put a 65-inch TV out there for us, outside. All right, we've come to a very special part of our program today where we introduce a new member, Christy Bryce, and I'll ask Linda Sanders to come up in the stead of Meg Ostrom, who is Christy's sponsor, and also past President Pat. Come on up.
One of the special traditions of our club that has developed through the years is the induction of new members, and it's presided over one of our past presidents. It is my distinct honor today to be, and privilege, to serve in that role. East Chapel Hill Rotarians is a great day when we can induct a new member into the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club. Our club is always needs the infusion of new blood, while at the same time extending the spirit of Rotary in the world and increasing the usefulness and influence of our Rotary Club throughout our community. Today we welcome to our ranks and admit to membership Christy Bryce. Christy, you have not only joined the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club, but a worldwide organization of more than 33,000 clubs in over 200 countries and 1.3 million members. You will be warmly welcomed by Rotary members and Rotary clubs anywhere that you may travel throughout the world. Rotary membership is an honor and a privilege, but it also carries with it some duties and expectations. Christy, you will be expected to regularly attend our club's meetings, participate in club service that you will learn more about, and be active in many fellowship activities that are offered. I encourage you to learn all about Rotary and this club, become engaged in the life of the club, and as I was told by a member when I first joined, you will look forward to every Friday when you can say, I get to go to Rotary today. You will find this. You will find that this club will celebrate with you when things are going well, and when necessary, offer support when needed. Always remember the Rotary motto: service above self. The goal of Rotary is to encourage the following ideals: the development of fellowship as an opportunity for service, high ethical standards in business and professions, the opportunity to serve society in the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace. Rotary challenges us all to live by the Rotary four-way test and always say and do. First, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Christy, do you accept this commitment?
Yes, I do.
Then I'll ask all members to rise. Christy, in the name of the Rotary Club of East Chapel Hill, it is my honor and privilege to formally admit you to the membership in our club and to ask Linda to affix your Rotary pin. Already done. Not surprising. Christy, if you could just take a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
Welcome, Christy.
Hi. I grew up in Chapel Hill and moved away during college. Ended up on the West Coast in California, where I was a nurse and then a nurse practitioner for over 10 years before becoming a nurse practitioner for over 20 years. I worked in a rural health clinic in Northern California and enjoyed being involved in my community there. I moved back to Chapel Hill to be close to my parents. So I left my community, things I was involved in, all of my friends and got back here and was looking for a way to get re-engaged with Chapel Hill and the community here. My brother has been in Rotary in Colorado for over 20 years, and he suggested that I looked into it. And I'm glad he made that suggestion. That's what brought me here. I was able to volunteer at the SECU house dinner last week, and it kind of confirmed my feeling that I was making the right decision, that this was a way for me to get involved and volunteer my time. So, thank you.
Chrissy, welcome to the club. We are glad you're here, and I look forward to getting to know you better because our professions have some similarities. But I will ask Linda Sanders to now introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you. You know, it's amazing. You get to be sub 2 times. So, Dr. Klaus, we're delighted to have you as the newest member of the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club. I am now subbing for Brian Keefe, and I have thought about having his voice. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to speak on. Well, you can imagine. So I'm actually very thrilled to introduce Professor Klaus Larres. Many of you might know Klaus from his Krasnow series. He holds the distinguished professorship at UNC, the distinguished Krasnow professorship at UNC. He is a leading expert in foreign affairs and international affairs, as well as diplomacy. And goodness knows we might get some insights as to what diplomacy could and maybe should look like these days. He has advised governments and think tanks across the globe. And so with no further ado, I am delighted to welcome Klaus to the stage. Welcome, Klaus.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. I couldn't have done it any better myself. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. And it's a shame that Brian Keeler isn't here because he introduced me to you and suggested that I should actually come and talk to you. So we miss him dearly today. But he has other exciting things to do, I understand. And I'm also glad that I didn't show up in my shorts as I'm being broadcast here. But I'm surprised that so many of you are here. I thought most of you would be in Greenland on the vice president's tour. But apparently Chapel Hill is more attractive than Greenland. One more thing before I go into what I want to talk about is I run that lecture series now mostly on Zoom, but not always, sometimes in person as well, the Krasnow Global Affairs lecture series. If you would like to follow us on Zoom and watch it on me, either live, in person, live, or on our YouTube channel afterwards, then just send me an email and I'll put you on the mailing list. Just send it to me personally, my personal email at UNC, and I put anyone who's interested on the mailing list, and then you will get to know all about our exciting events. Today, I would like to talk about Europe and Russia mostly. I don't want to focus so much on China because we don't really know what the Trump administration's politics towards China will be. We know tariffs have been imposed on China as well, 20% in addition to the tariffs which were already on China. But apart from that, nothing much has happened. There's always talk about a grand bargain between the United States and China, but this probably is sheer speculation. We really don't know much more about it. We have many more details. We know much more about Europe and Russia, what the administration's policy is. But let me first go back to the Yalta Conference of February 1945.
Winston Churchill, according to his memoirs, said to himself at the Yalta Conference, "There I sat with a great Russian bear on one side of me, with paws outstretched, and on the other side the great American buffalo. Between the two sat the poor little English donkey, who was the only one who knew the right way out, the right way home." And I think that is not just a good quote, and indicates really that Britain by that stage, Europe by that stage, had become very much the junior partner to the United States and the Soviet Union. But it also tells you something about how the Europeans look at themselves. Of course, they are wiser and superior to the United States. That goes back to the long history, the British Empire, the Europeans, and it also indicates that tension in transatlantic relations. Because, of course, the United States believes it knows the right way forward, the right way home, and that tension, that conflict in transatlantic relations has really been with us since 1945. So there's always been tension. When we now, because of the current conflict in transatlantic relations, when we look back nostalgically, think, God, there was so much harmony in the past. Not quite. There always was a lot of tension in transatlantic relations. Think about the Cold War and the discussions about the strategic doctrines. They first called it rollback, and then they came to think, well, rolling back communism is kind of difficult. Also, you don't want to embark on a nuclear war. So they came up with another strategic doctrine, flexible response. You react flexibly if there should be a Soviet invasion. And that was highly controversial in transatlantic relations. It took them years to resolve that. Then we had the Vietnam War, and the Europeans were not impressed by the Vietnam War. No European countries, including even the British, participated. They refused to send troops to Vietnam. And there were monetary difficulties in the 1970s, and the oil crisis was in the 1970s, where both sides of the transatlantic relationship were really at loggerheads. The United States in the 1970s resented the Europeans, perhaps thinking about establishing their own common European currency. And because Nixon and Kissinger at the time believed that was the beginning of Europe splitting off from the United States, of Europe becoming a third pillar in world affairs, becoming too independent. But these difficulties were overcome. And there also were difficulties towards Russia, towards the Soviet Union. How should we deal with the Soviet Union, particularly in the 1980s? Should there be a policy of détente, a rapprochement, or should there be a hardline policy towards the Soviet Union? And then Gorbachev did us a favor to resolve it to us, because he seemed to be generally a constructive, forward-looking, visionary politician. When we go back more recently, then we see that transatlantic relations have become more vicious, more hostile than they used to be during the Cold War. During the Cold War, there was lots of tension, but it was tension based on the same value system. No one talked about leaving NATO or really splitting up, divorcing the transatlantic relationship. And I would say current difficulties have gone back to really the Iraq War of the early 2000s and the George W. Bush relationship. That, in my view, was for the first time that transatlantic relations seemed to reach almost a breaking point. However, it didn't last long. It was really overcome within a few months. At the time, of course, we talked about Donald Rumsfeld, Defense Secretary at the time, we talked about old Europe and new Europe. But it was quickly overcome, and in the second Bush administration, the second term of George W. Bush, relations were much better. Then there was Obama, there was tension, particularly about how to resolve the Great Recession, but tensions were overcome. Then we had the first Bush administration, the first Trump administration, and things, of course, as we well remember, went downhill. Then Biden came and seemed to reinstall a new harmony in transatlantic relations. And now we have the second Trump administration, and this administration has gone back to what they already started in the first administration, in the first term, it is difficult. And there are some fundamental difficulties between the United States and the Europeans. In the first administration, the difficulties related to Brexit, that Trump was in favor of Brexit, and that meant the Europeans interpreted that as Trump was in favor of splitting up Europe, breaking up Europe. And it was all about trade deficits. Trump, already in the first term, accused the Europeans of running an unfair trade deficit with the United States. And there was also NATO, and military was a deficiency of European spending on their defense policy. And all these issues have come back to us now during the second term, but only in a, I would say, almost more hardline way. But what was not overcome in the first term really is still with us. And how to overcome that, I think, is the great question of our times. I think on both sides of the Atlantic, certainly outside the main pillars of the administration in Washington, D.C., there's very little appetite for divorcing from Europe. And I also know in Europe, for sure, there is no appetite for divorcing from the United States. While the current difficulties have led to an increase of anti-Americanism in Europe, but that increase is superficial, I believe, and could easily be reverted to back to something much more constructive and reversed if tension was overcome between the United States and the European Union. Therefore, I think it is really a matter of high politics, what we see now. There have been stories about Europeans being less interested in coming to the United States as students or as tourists because of apparent border difficulties or the anxiety that there could be difficulties at the border. But I think these are all relatively superficial anecdotes which do not affect the view of most Europeans, how they view the United States. I think there is still a desire, a very strong desire, I would say, among most European countries to be on good terms with the United States. There is no desire to split up from the United States. What we see now, the planning, the alternative defense planning, or the contingency plans about what would happen if the Trump administration did withdraw from NATO, or if tariffs were even doubled, 25% which were imposed recently, more tariffs are to come on the 2nd of April apparently. That is contingency planning in an emergency situation. That is not something the Europeans really want to do. When the French are talking about expanding the French nuclear umbrella to the rest of Europe, making France responsible in a nuclear way for protecting Europe instead of the American nuclear umbrella, then in my view this is slightly unrealistic. And secondly, this is not the desire of most European countries at all. They would like to continue be protected by the United States, and they are prepared to pay more for it. What has changed the European attitude is, of course, the pressure by the Trump administration, 1, and 2, that Europeans have to spend more in defense, which they should have done many years ago, but it has also been Putin. I think it wasn't just the United States and pressure by Trump, it was above all the invasion of Europe, of a European country, Ukraine, by the Russians. That has really been a turning point to the European attitude in defense. And Putin has already come twice. It started in 2014 with annexing the Crimean Peninsula and some territories in eastern Ukraine, particularly the Donbass. Then he came back again in 2022 to then fully invade Ukraine. This has been a total wake-up call to all European countries, including the more pacifistic European countries like Germany, who, because of their history and also because of America's and Britain's re-education policy after the Second World War, did become quite pacifistic and didn't want to know about the necessity of having a strong army, a strong air force, and so on. That all got reversed by the shock of Putin's two invasions. Then, of course, pressure from the Trump administration also contributed to that. When we look at the Trump administration, then we wonder, what are the driving forces? What are the driving forces behind the US policy to be much more skeptical, to put it widely, towards Europe than was the case for the previous 80 years? And I think there's one point which kind of summarizes it all nicely at the beginning, perhaps. That is that Trump wants to be a transformative president. Every president, Obama, Biden, Clinton, Bush, anywhere, wants to go down in history in an impressive way. I think this is natural for any president. And Trump certainly shares that. And he definitely wants to be transformative, both in domestic policy and also in foreign policy. And I think the Europeans need to take that on board and perhaps help Trump to achieve that. And how would he achieve that in his own mind, if my interpretation is correct? First of all, by becoming an international peacemaker. And in principle, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, there's a lot right in that. You want to be a peacemaker. You don't want to be a war president. And going back to Churchill perhaps for a minute, when Churchill lost office in the summer of 1945, because he lost the general election, from then on he became leader of the opposition and then prime minister again for a second time in 1951. And he also thought deeply about his role in history. And he knew his role in history was as a successful wartime prime minister. What a prime minister! What a way to go down in history. But Churchill always also was depressed by that. He thought, I don't want to go down in history as a warrior, as a war maker, or even a successful one. I want to be a peacemaker. And he worked for the next few years until he left politics and retired properly in 1955. So for the next 10 years, between 45 and 55, he worked on going down in history also as a peacemaker. How did he do that? He did do that by, first of all, pushing for a united Europe. That often is forgotten, and he later had second thoughts about it, but he pushed very hard initially, particularly in the 1940s, for a reconciliation between Germany and France. And of course, indirectly, he contributed to it. He wasn't alone responsible for it. He was fairly successful. And he pushed for a European Union, as we call it now. The only flaw in his reasoning was, as we then later found out, he did not think that his own country, Britain, should be part of a united Europe. Many people at the time thought, great, the British are on board. We really have a proper united Europe. And it later turned out Churchill meant a united Europe is good for continental Europeans, but not for an empire like the United Kingdom. But apart from that flaw, in my view, a big flaw, he was actually quite right, pushing for a united Europe, and he, together with others of course, was successful. And the second way to go down in history was that he wanted to overcome the Cold War. And he wanted to get together with the Soviet Union and the United States, like at Yalta, like at Potsdam, and Britain of course, and convene a big summit of the big three and overcome the Cold War by means of a constructive peace settlement, so by negotiations. In the end, he failed with that because the United States President, first Truman, then Eisenhower, was not convinced that it was possible to get together with the Soviet Union at a big summit and then resolve difficulties. Even after the death of Stalin in 1953, Eisenhower was not convinced that way was the way to go forward. And Churchill despaired. He really tried everything in his declining power. It became quite old and frail at that time, that it was the right way forward. He wanted to go down in history as a peacemaker, but he also thought that was the right way forward to the world. Going to our times again, so pushing for peace in principle is of course good. Who wants a war to continue forever, particularly such a bloody war of daily civilian and military death and injuries, attacks on electricity goods, on apartment houses and hospitals? This is of course no way to live. But the way the current government proceeds is not how Churchill would have proceeded. Even at his greatest weakness, when he really was also desperate to get the great powers around the table and overcome the Cold War, he never forgot that he was dealing in the form of Stalin's Soviet Union and then the successor to Stalin was a dictatorial police state. That was not a democracy, that was not a state which observed human rights. And I think now there seems to be the temptation in Washington to overlook the nature of Putin's regime. That doesn't mean we shouldn't negotiate with Putin. Of course we should talk to him, but we shouldn't necessarily take his word as a given and trust him too much. We need guarantees, like a security guarantee. We need evidence and we need controls. And I think that is the main issue between the Europeans and the United States today about how to end the Ukraine war. Of course the Europeans want to end the Ukraine war. The Germans being still quite pacifistic, and also other European countries would love to see the war over as soon as possible, but not in the way that it opens up another front in a few months, a few years' time. You want to make sure the war can be overcome in a proper way, in a settled way, and in a controlled way. And unfortunately, that is not what seems to be the thinking right now in Washington. And I think here a lot of room for improvement is possible. And we have seen very critical media coverage regarding some of the Trump people's attitude towards Russia, and maybe that will lead to some greater reflection. Or if Putin really continues dragging out, coming to some sort of proper settlement, maybe that will also then percolate down in the White House and lead to some different opinion. So I think it is quite possible for transatlantic relations here to come together again. Of course, the Europeans need to be at the table, as the Ukrainians should be. You know, to have only Russia and the United States talk about a third country which has been invaded. That's a bit like, you know, I don't want to go too much into detail, but that reminds us what happened with Chamberlain and Hitler and the third countries which were totally ignored, which were not at the table, like Czechoslovakia at the time. This should not, we should learn from history. Of course we have progressed, there's no Chamberlain, there's no Hitler around right now, but there are also other dictators around. They know, I don't think we have the same people, you know, they are different, have their own problems, but I don't think, you know, whatever you want to say about Putin, I say many critical things about Putin, but I wouldn't say he's a second Hitler. So, you know, in that way, you know, it is a better, slightly better situation. But we should not make the same mistakes. We should learn from history. And that is the reason why, of course, the study of history is highly important. Then I think if we go towards the American policy, which is seen critically in Europe, it is the idea of money. that you conduct foreign policy to make a profit. This is seen very critically in Europe. And the minerals deal with Ukraine, which is being discussed, may be signed in the future, who knows? This is often interpreted as really the Ukrainians are being put very much under pressure and they have no chance to really resist. If they want to continue American support for themselves, they really need to sign the minerals deal, which seems to be highly lucrative for the United States in the long run. And this is seen highly critical in Europe. You know, if the US gets a good minerals deal for past services to Ukraine and deliveries of aid, why wouldn't the Europeans ask for the same? Because at least 50%, if not more than 50%, of military and financial aid to Ukraine actually comes from Europe. So they also have the right to get such a mineral deal. But that is seen as you are helping a country which is being invaded. Should you really benefit from that in a monetary way? You know, this is, at least one should consider it and reflect about it. Of course, you can again go back into history. American aid deliveries to Britain, for example, these were land-lease deliveries. They were not entirely free either. And the loan negotiated between the United States and Britain at the end of 1945 to help post-war Britain did not come free as the British had hoped. An interest rate was charged. You know, the British had hoped at the time they would get a free interest, generous loan from the United States. And even Churchill's help did not persuade Truman at the time that that would be the case. So they had to pay interest, not extraordinary high interest rates, but they had to pay interest. So, you know, I think it's not untypical for countries trying to benefit from a difficult situation, but I think the minerals deal is too much of a good thing as far as I can judge. Then it also occurs to me, and I want to make two brief points, there is something like the power of dominance which we see in DC right now. Because what is the point of bullying Canada? One of America's closest allies for many years. And Canada will never become the 51st state, but you create a lot of bad will. So what's the point of all that, unless you want to basically determine and demonstrate you are the stronger one, you can push other countries around, even if it actually has negative economic consequences. And my last point is about shaping the future. What is the world going to look like if we follow the current administration in DC? And I think we would return to a big three world. What Trump seems to have in mind is really running the world together with the two other strong powers, Russia and China, with the United States still probably being the strongest of this new big three. This, I think, is not the way forward. This would be a way back to the time before 1945, maybe even to the 19th century, and it would create instability. Other smaller countries will have to fall in with that for the time being. They don't have much of a choice. They will be unhappy. They will not be satisfied. The European Union will become restless. Other countries, Asian countries, will all become restless. This is a recipe for future instability. And I think this should not really be executed. So that new big three world, which some people in the White House seem to have in mind, and the rapprochement with Putin seems to be the beginning of that, I think is ill-advised. What we have had so far has actually worked. There was tension all the time. But transatlantic relations, that very close cooperation between the United States and a democratic Europe, so far has worked well for both sides of the Atlantic. Not without difficulties. Also, there were trade deficits, there was some money perhaps unnecessarily spent that can be improved upon, but to throw out the whole mechanism for something totally untested I think is pretty unwise. So I would say we need to go back to a good European-American relationship. Of course, improve on it. Think about military contributions by the Europeans, definitely. Perhaps also think about containing trade deficits, things like that. But we should not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Thank you very much.
We have time for questions.
Professor, for my background, I guess I have 4 concerns. As you well know, you need a strong diplomatic corps or arm. I'm not sure just exactly what we have right now in the way of a diplomatic team. And on then adding that, the last step in diplomacy, of course, is to use armed forces. Right now, we've threatened 6 or 7 different countries with war, and yet we are in worse shape as far as armed forces, whether it's personnel, assets, industry, than we were before the Korean War. And then we also need a strong economy, of course, and yet we're messing with that, and that's a little confused with the tariffs and everything else. And finally, just putting together all this team, the best I can see is just utter chaos.
Well, I wouldn't disagree. And I think what is striking is the degree of incompetence we have at really senior levels of the government. And it probably is less incompetent the lower down you go. There are still very good people left at the State Department, at the working level, at the Treasury, and all sorts of ministries. They haven't suddenly disappeared, unless they have been sacked by Elon Musk. But most of these people, I hope, are still there. But the senior levels, and they are important. They really, tell them the directions they need to proceed. I think there seems to be a high level of incompetence. And the recent leaks, the Signal leaks, the National Security League, of course, indicates that high degree of incompetence. Someone said, well, it is all intentional. The more incompetent the cabinet ministers are, the better the man in the White House looks. I don't know if that is correct.
I forgot to mention, of course, what we've done with our general intelligence.
Yeah.
Whether it's a recent week or stripping people from every area relating to intelligence.
Yeah.
Combine all those 4 together, I just throw my hands up.
Yeah, and also, as you will have heard, talking about Europe, even the British now have concerns sharing their intelligence information with the United States, which is a very sad state of affairs.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Is there any expectation that the Europeans are going to trust us again? Should we elect a very different president next time?
I would say yes. I mean, now it looks all very, very terrible, very chaotic, very incompetent. But that also was the impression during the Iraq War and the George W. Bush administration. People were really at loggerheads. The French and the Germans were getting together with the Russians to think about, what they could do in the United Nations about preventing the Iraq invasion and so on. So at the time, we also thought that's the end of transatlantic relations. That's the end of everything we have had so far. And within a few months after some rethinking occurred in the White House, and also people like Colin Powell and others had some influence on the president. Suddenly it all seemed to calm down and people got together again and reasonable transatlantic relations returned, including trusting relations. I would not exclude that for today. It would probably take a lot longer than under Bush. Under Bush it really was a matter of 6 months or something, which is relatively quick. It probably now would take a couple of years, maybe even a little longer, but I don't think it would be impossible. It depends on the development and on the signals which would come out of the White House and the State Department and similar departments. So I'm not that pessimistic regarding the long-term future, but in the short run it will be difficult. It's like with Putin, you know. If you want to trust Putin, you want to see pretty convincing evidence that there has been some sort of change of mind or some change. And if Putin doesn't provide that, then of course you don't continue to trust him. And again, I don't want to compare Putin with an American president, of course, but still something like that. You need evidence, and then I think people will come around again.
Two quick questions. First, what do you believe Putin wants to give up nothing? What do you believe is the best possible outcome from Ukraine in terms of how much of its territory it may ever get back, if it can get back and inch of it? And second question, Putin is 72, still seems to be in good health, but what happens when he goes?
Yeah, there's pressure on Putin as well. You know, Putin, I think, knows that it's a nationalist right, an even more extreme nationalist right than he is himself. So if he gives in, let's say Putin would compromise with Ukraine, a genuine compromise, that actually would be highly difficult for him within Russia, in the elite, not in the ordinary people, but the people in the Kremlin who could, you know, the oligarchs who could partially topple him if they wanted to, particularly in the military. So I think he has to watch his back as well. He's not like the undisputed king as we often see him here, that he can do what he wants and there's no opposition. There is a lot of discontent, a lot of opposition to Putin as well. But it's difficult to know how strong it is, how widespread it is. That, of course, is information at least I'm not aware of. Maybe the US intelligence services or the British will know more about that. So after Putin, I think a lot of people say, oh, it may get even worse. I can't see that. That's the same whenever a dictator falls. Usually a dictator has a certain authority, a certain charisma, which cannot easily be replaced by his or her successor. And it would require much more force on the Russian population to establish another very hardline regime after Putin. Because the authority of the man, the charisma of the man, and the sway over his people will be gone. So and I think it is very difficult to replace that. Your first part of the question, I think Crimea is probably lost, and probably some areas of the Donbass may also have to be given up. These are the Russian-speaking, largely Russian-speaking part of Ukraine on the eastern border with Russia. The Ukrainians will not like that, of course, but it's very difficult to see that can not happen. The big question is NATO membership and also EU membership. And here I think we should not really compromise. NATO membership is unlikely in the near future, but should we rule it out for the next 10 years or 20 years? I think some way should be kept open. And regarding EU membership, I think that should proceed as soon as possible. We should not accept a Putin veto over EU membership. You know, Putin will say, oh, the EU is now not just an economic or political organization, but it's becoming ever more a militarized organization. So we can't tolerate that either. I think, you know, the military might between NATO and the EU is still and will be still formidable. So a veto over EU membership should certainly not be acceptable. And regarding NATO, for the sake of arriving at a settlement, perhaps in the short run, but not for all times.
One more question.
It's a quick one. As a former European, I think the thing that shocked me the most about the signal mess-up was how they had basically peeled off the glove and displayed the scorn that they had for the European countries by saying, we're not going to bail them out this time. We're not going to make them not pay for the peace in the Red Sea. I found it so shocking.
Absolutely. No, and also I think Vance talked about pathetic. The Europeans are pathetic. Yeah, and particularly, of course, the Red Sea, while it is an important trade route, it is no more important for Europe than it is for the United States. So if it had been, the Mediterranean, perhaps, you could understand that they said, oh, we feel like bailing out Europe. The Red Sea and fighting against the Houthis is not a particularly European concern. It's no more so than an American concern. So that shows, a very anti-European bias, which is not even trying to be objective. And I don't know where that comes from, that really hatred almost of the Europeans. And I'm not sure that, it's difficult to know if Trump really shares that. I think Vance almost seems to be in a category by himself. He seems to be very, very isolationist, and even more so, I think, than Trump himself. Yeah, it is shocking, I quite agree, but maybe I'm too optimistic, If you look 4 years hence, I don't think it is not possible to go back to a more sensible period of time.
Dr. Larres.
Otherwise, have a great weekend.
Thank you.